Test 1, 2. of signups for Say Goodbye to Email Overload using Microsoft 365 and cybersecurity. Y'all are showing up for that. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, I would like to introduce a committee who, without them, today would not be possible. I would like to introduce Carol Mason to the stage.
And Belinda, don't go anywhere. I am stepping down as your president of staff council due to health issues. So I'm going to introduce you to your new executive board. We got Nikki Records as your president. On the spot. Give 100%, I'm going to give no percent. So, to y'all, but I'm leaving y'all in great hands.
Okay, at this time, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker. Tiffany S.W. Hamilton, a distinguished professional in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion, is currently at the helm of the YWCA of White Plains in Central Westchester, where she presides as CEO. Prior to her appointment, she held the esteemed position of inaugural Chief Diversity Officer at Pace University, where she developed a comprehensive blueprint for DEI efforts spanning across the university's 13,000 members. Tiffany also established the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, where she effectively harnessed the collective power of 6 offices in support of DEI initiatives across the institution's 3 campuses. In collaboration with PACE's leadership, she played a pivotal role in establishing the prestigious Barry M. and Jackie Gosen Center for Equity and Inclusion, securing a significant $2 million gift for its founding. Before her tenure at PACE, Tiffany served as the inaugural Chief Diversity Officer of Westchester Community College. Do you guys remember Tiffany? Yeah. Where she implemented a strategic plan to bridge equity gaps in student achievement, refined hiring practices, and provided communication and engagement strategies. Her commitment to DEI extended beyond the campus and into the community, as evidenced by her active engagement with the AJC of Westchester and Fairfield, where she even co-chaired an annual Thanksgiving diversity breakfast. Tiffany's passion for equity and inclusion, Tiffany's passion for equity, Tiffany's passion for equity and inclusive excellence has made her a highly sought-after thought leader, providing support and guidance to nonprofit organizations across Staten Island with annual budgets exceeding $16 million. In one remarkable case, she crafted 6-year DEI plans submitted to New York State. As a member of the executive board of the Westchester Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, Inc., Tiffany holds the esteemed position of First Vice President and Chair of Program Planning and Development. She is known for her ability to communicate vision, purpose, and build consensus across multiple dimensions, whether in academic institutions, corporate boardrooms, or charitable organizations. Tiffany's philosophy, lead by serving and gain by giving, is centered on the ideals of service and giving as a lifestyle. Above all, she cherishes her role as a devoted mother to Soror Imani Everett and wife to Ron C. Hamilton. Please help me in welcoming our keynote speaker today, Tiffany Hamilton.
Well, good morning. Bless your hearts. Same, y'all know me. Same energy I get from you all will be the same energy I put into our time together. Good morning. Good morning. Hey, Quinn, a familiar face, and lots of familiar faces, but I saw my guy Quinn. Very good to see you. It is always awkward to sit and hear about yourself, but I hope what you heard most was that my transition out east began here. And even though I'm from Missouri, I'm a borrow from my girl Dorothy in Kansas. There is no place like home. Being here on the campus of the SUNY Westchester Community College just feels so very good, and everything that I do with this place in mind, because this was the first institution and organization of faculty, staff, and students who welcomed this little young girl from the Midwest with open arms, with a creative vision for equity and inclusion, and you all were responsive to that. You welcomed me, you nurtured me, and so all of that you hear in that bio began here. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the Dr. Belinda Miles, right, who was my first supervisor, and thank her for her leadership, but also want to recognize Nikki, who thought it not robbery, her and the committee who thought it not robbery to invite me into this space today to share this sacred time as we lean into this thing of communication. And for those of you that have connected or heard me speak before, I'll move a little bit, but I'll try not to go off script, because when I go off script, that's when I get in trouble, and I'm trying to keep a job, okay? So with that, it is Women's History Month. I am honored to serve and lead the YWCA of White Plains and Central Westchester, where our mission is to eliminate racism, empower women, and foster peace, justice, and dignity for everyone. We do that whether that's through our 193 women at our women's residence, or through our court supervised visits program, special programs, our CLC, aquatics, gymnastics, before and after school. All of that is possible because of what started here. So when we talk about this art of communication, it is really important to keep in mind who we individually are bringing into the space of communication. See, this continues to be a season where our community finds themselves challenged by the climate of the time. I don't need to unpack climate. You can pick one thing and we will find ourselves challenged by the climate of the time. In our individual lived spaces, we find that we're spending time trying to figure out what exactly is happening around us. This cannot be the world that I dreamed of, right? Coming out of the pandemic, which occurred just 4 years ago, almost to the date, right? Of when that initial shutdown happened, we find that many things have shifted coming out of that space, right? Our priorities have shifted. How we spend our time has shifted. Who we spend our time with has shifted. And what we allow us to go to 10, right? Stuff that used to send me to a 10 doesn't send me to a 10 anymore. Because after 4 years of isolation, you recognize that your time on this side of the dirt is short. And what we put into that time, we got to be more intentional about it. If you're with me, And so the last 4 years have changed how we show up in this space. The last 4 years changed not only how we show up, but how we treat each other. Yes. I remember during the pandemic how gracious we were, right? When you hadn't been around people, we were so nice. We were some of the nicest folks, weren't we? Because we didn't have the opportunity to connect. Y'all remember that? We were super nice. We had club quarantine, right? Because we just missed people. Anybody was part of club quarantine with DJ Nights, you would log on to Instagram, just listen to the music. It's just you and your cat in the apartment, just moving and grooving. Yeah? You remember that? Remember those Zoom parties? We had to figure out, first of all, am I going to subscribe to Zoom or am I going to use this free 45 minutes? We would create those little Zoom parties because we missed connecting with each other. We even would have those FaceTime moments, right? Yeah. And that was because we needed to see people. We missed the interaction of people. We missed communicating, but we also missed hearing from people. Y'all remember how heavy that was to be away from folks and how we yearned and desired community and connection? And then just 4 short years later, here we are back to our selfish-centered selves. Maybe it's just my lived experience. And see, I live on Stanford. I live in Stanford, Connecticut. So maybe this doesn't happen on this side, in this state, where people just nasty. They don't see you on the highway. They don't see you in the grocery store, cart bumped up against the back of your leg. You know, you just don't see each other anymore. Just 4 years later, and in some instances sooner, we've returned to our self-centered, selfish selves. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is that our communication with one another has drastically changed how we interact, how we show up, and what we contribute to the spaces that we occupy. And that's why I themed our conversation that it's time for something different. Right. We don't need another global pandemic to shut us down, to teach us how to be nice to one another. Right? We don't need another moment of isolation to really challenge us to think about how we show up and how we interact with each other. Because with our work, if you think about it, we literally have the lives of students and our colleagues in our hands every single day. And I don't mean it from a medical perspective, like you gotta do CPR and keep somebody alive. No, when you are interacting, whether it's with a colleague or with a student, that is a moment in time that neither one of you will ever see again. And when you think about the art of communication, we can make the conscious decision of what we deposit into that moment or what we withdraw from that moment. Think about that, right? So if we think about that student that comes into your office on those good summer Fridays, you know, there are some things that I miss about WCC. I miss a good summer Friday. But think about it when that student comes into your office right before the office is about to close, the weather is nice outside, you already know the rooftop you're about to go to after you leave this campus, and then they come in with that problem that you know is a Monday morning 4-hour process, and you only have 45 minutes. In that moment, we can make that conscious decision of what we deposit into that moment and what we withdraw out of that moment, right? Was it did we make a deposit into their well-being? Or based on our reaction, did we debit their trust? Because we were so in a hurry to figure out what was best for us. When you interact with that particular colleague that walks in and you're in the middle of that email, right? And they are taking you on a journey. It's so funny when we talk about communication. You know, my husband is actually en route back from Switzerland, and there are so many, he's been gone for the last 2.5 weeks, and there are so many things I can't wait to tell him about. But one of the things that we had to establish in year 1, that's why we made it to year 7, is this code, because I'm a storyteller, if you can't tell. And he will say to me, do I need to go on the journey or can you land the plane? Right? Because I have a partner who gets overstimulated by the long story. So he has to compartmentalize the time in his mind to either be on this journey. I said, it's gonna be a journey, but it's first class. Or if he's pressed for time, he says, I have a moment for you to land the plane, but I can commit to the journey a little bit later. That's a communication strategy because he didn't want to hurt my feelings. He wanted to validate that what I wanted to share in that moment is important, but let me tell you what bandwidth I have to receive what it is that you're trying to deposit. So if you think about communication, there was the opportunity for him to either make a deposit into the well-being of the marriage, or a debit to the trust. Right. But it was all because he was intentional. He valued that moment. He valued the outcome. And more than the moment, it was how we were going to show up for each other thereafter. So let me bring it back to the campus. When we interact with the student, even if we only have 22 minutes, don't feel like you have to scrunch that time in. Let's not do that, but let's model for the receiver of the message that, you know what, this is something that requires a little bit more time. I'm going to place it on the calendar and we're going to get to that. So whether that's the student or the colleague, sometimes we have to teach people how to treat us. And let me be clear, I recognize that I may be introducing concepts that we don't even model in our everyday lives, and I'm gonna get to that in just a second, but one of the things that I wanna share is proofhub.com talks about effective communication is the bridge that connects individuals, enabling them to share information, build relationships, and collaborate with precision and empathy. And when you think about the short amount of time that we have to get our agenda done, sometimes that time restraint drives how much attention we give to a situation or not. And in order for us to build relationships and collaborate with precision and empathy, it involves active listening, empathy, and choosing the appropriate channels and language. I love that you all are going to be talking about email and AI and other entities that can support electronic communication, because we know a lot can get lost in translation in written word, right? Words on a screen lack emotion. So exploring those appropriate challenges in language. And effective communication is not merely about speaking or writing. It's about conveying messages in a way that is understood and fosters a meaningful connection. If you're with me, Whether it's in personal relationships, professional relationships, or broader social context, mastering the art of effective communication is essential for success in building stronger connections. And as I mentioned, this may be a concept that folks may not model in their everyday lives. Let me be clear. I'm at the grocery store in the mall. I see folks how they talk crazy to their kids, talk crazy to their spouse, talk crazy to anybody that's within earshot. And then here we come on this campus and the expectation is different, because it's time for something different. This skill is not just something that's going to make the workplace more palatable and more manageable. It is something that is going to make life a little bit more worth living. Because now you've committed to being a better you. Let me take it down this lane. Communication is directly tied to your personal brand. Think about that. You know what I mean? If as I mentioned earlier, if this is the only time, if this is the last time that you all interact with me, I want to make sure that the piece of my brand that I leave with you is consistent with how I desire to show up. And that means I have to constantly challenge and check those things that might encourage me or provoke me to present in a manner opposite of the brand that I desire to show up as, right? So whether it was an argument, because I take 95 to get here to 287, So whether it was that person that cut me off in that Audi and I was like, Tiffany, you can't cuss them out because they might pull up on the campus parking lot and I see you, you see me. We saw each other on the highway. You see what I mean? Those are moments that could evoke me responding in a way that's inconsistent with how I desire to show up. So when we think about, we're going to spend a little time talking about the brand, because I think it's important that we realize that all of these things are interconnected. When we talk about communication, I'm not just talking about the folks that talk crazy, I'm also talking about the over-communicators. The people that constantly jump in or speak over you or finish your sentence. You can't possibly know what I'm about to say because you didn't let me finish my sentence. That's a little tagline I learned when I constantly interacted with a colleague who felt that interjection was the appropriate way for us to collaboratively communicate. Hello, somebody. Finding those little taglines to help folks say, you know what, I might have just spoken over you. You're right. Let me step back. But so this conversation is not just for those that don't do it well or don't do it often. It's also for those that may do it a little too much. We have to be conscious about how our communication is tied to our brand. And here's what we know about your personal brand. Your personal brand is not how you believe you show up in spaces. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room. That's what I keep in mind. And I'm not talking about the gossipers, no. Think about your name being in rooms that you don't even yet have access to. That only happens when the fullness of your brand is deposited in a positive way in your interactions with each other, and in your interactions with each other. Think about brand. When you And y'all probably like, well, Tiffany, the folks that need to hear this ain't in the room, but we're in the room together. Think about brand. These images all have something in common. What might they have in common? Most of them are out of business because they failed to evolve. And I'm gonna speak specifically to the person who's like, it is what it is. I'm on this side of life. I don't have time to change. This is just how I am. A certain generation needs to get some thicker skin. You know those folks. Mm-hmm. Well, you ask yourself if you want to be Blockbuster, Kodak, or Toys R Us. Because you can devolve yourself out of access to spaces and opportunities because you're refusing to receive the VIP invitation to one particular room, and that's the room for improvement. Right? And so these brands tell a very clear story that if you fail to evolve, you expire. There's another set of brands that I also want to bring to your attention. This group here. See, like Tiffany, what does Costco and cornbread have in common? But this isn't just any old cornbread, this Jiffy. Jiffy cornbread. Huh? Any guesses on what these two brands might have in common? They evolved. Close. They definitely have evolved. The Costco of a couple of years ago isn't the Costco of the day, but that Jiffy cornbread is kind of the same, isn't it? But guess what? When's the last time you seen a commercial for Costco or Jiffy? It's been a minute. But because of their brand reputation, they don't have to invest in certain things because they're consistent with their product and people are speaking their names for them. So when you think of the brand, your experience with Costco, even though you know that bag of candy is cheaper at Walmart, it's the experience of Costco that keeps you going. It's a consistent brand that they don't even have to invest in commercials or marketing strategies because, as the young folks say, if you know, you know. Right. Jiffy cornbread, huh? I don't even think I was raised during the time where, I know they had commercials back in the day, but everybody knows when somebody's making a dressing, they ask her, what cornbread you using? Huh? Jiffy cornbread. It has an identity and a brand that has been consistent through the years. Its name isn't on TV or on a billboard, but that brand and the consistency of that brand has drawn a particular crowd. And then lastly, how about these folks? Yeah, right, somebody, I'm gonna be somebody, that's out of my pay range, huh? Bentley and Rolls Royce, almost very similar. You never see a commercial for it, because the target audience already knows where they are. They know how to access. Their names are in rooms. We envy, I don't want to say envy, we celebrate, we revere these brands because it presents a bit of gravitas. And so I want to just come down your block. Which of you find yourselves in the first, second, or third column of branding? Or how do you desire to show up? Do I desire that my experiences be so authentic and genuine and empowering, even when I'm saying some heavy and hard things? I preserve professional integrity and people just keep coming back. People just keep mentioning my name because of how I approach this work. So when we talk about communication, it is directly tied to your brand. As I mentioned, if this is the last day you ever interact with me, my goal is for those interactions to be consistent with my brand. And if we think about communication as a direct tie to our brand, if this is the last day, the last page that anybody reads in the book of your life, what will they say about you? Right? And so we have to be mindful that even with all those competing variables that may evoke an emotion of anger or frustration, create the space to say, you know what? I am not going to allow this situation to compromise my brand. I'm going to take a breath. And I'm gonna get to some strategies in just a second. And so when we think about these brands you haven't seen a commercial for, their quality is so good that we talk about them without an ounce of advertising. Bentley and Rolls Royce. See, I can't even say it. That's how I know I came back. Their names are in rooms because they're just that good. The target audience they seek to reach knows how to find them. And that's the opportunity for us, that our brand is just that good, that people will find us because they know that we will handle the situation with care. If you're with me, So let me bring it again to the room. Thank you. You're still on the bus. What impression is your brand? Your communication style? Leaving those, what is the impression that you're leaving with those? Is it impactful or does it impede someone's progress? Are they aligned with how you desire to show up? From our communication with students and with each other, you got to turn to yourself and say, it's time for something different. These brands remind us that our communication must evolve or it will expire, have a positive impact or it will impede progress, and it should have a positive place even in the absence of physical presence. Right? Your brand and how you communicate should have a positive place even without your presence. Now, our communication isn't just verbal. It's also the nonverbal communications that also influences and impacts how we interact. Y'all know the body language, right? In this season, we need to see each other and not just hear each other. We have to be able to read the room, right? To see if someone is physically not present in the conversation. It's okay to say, you know what? I recognize that the weight of this conversation requires a bit of my undivided attention. Let me reschedule a time where we can clearly walk through that. That is okay, to give yourself permission, and that models for the other person to, kind of read the room. You see I'm not physically here. You talking to me, I'm on my way to the bathroom. And you want me to provide an amendment to the Constitution, huh? Let's get that on the calendar. Is this an email or is it a phone call or is it a meeting, right? And so when we think about our communication not being just verbal, the nonverbal, I was reminded of a scene of a show that I used to watch. So let's take a look at that really quickly.
Pops, you should have seen it. The boy just stared at him, no nod, like his neck was broken.
Well, maybe something is wrong with his neck. Did you ask him?
Something wrong with your neck, boy?
What? No, I don't think so.
So he did nod at somebody. I don't get what the big deal is.
Of course you don't. Look, babe, the nod is important. It's the internationally accepted, yet unspoken sign of acknowledgement of black folks around the world.
So thank you very much.
So no matter who you are or where you're at, it's your duty to give the nod. Even in the most extreme of circumstances, we always found a way to let each other know, I see you, bruh.
Dre, please do not turn this into yet another thing. The truth is that Junior's generation has a different perspective on the struggle than you and Pops. Can't you just let that be a good thing?
No!
Okay.
No, the nod is on the same primal level as a baby waving high.
That's right.
So how many of us are familiar with the nod? Yeah? And the reason I wanted to bring that up is not just the cultural influence and experience that the nod has had in not only my transition from the East, but just in my life growing up. It was something that I was exposed to and familiar with. But there are two things that stood out to me about this particular clip. Is that when we're communicating with other folks, we also have to keep culture in mind. A person's lack of response may not be because they're ignoring you, right? Or they just don't want to respond. Maybe it's because they respect hierarchy, and that's a direct influence of their culture. There's some components in there. The lack of eye contact may not mean that they're disrespecting you. It could be a cultural thing, right? Those are nonverbal pieces that we also have to be aware of. And then when we start asking those questions, why isn't Tiffany looking me in the eye? You've made this now about you. Effective communication requires us to decenter self and focus on the situation and moment that we're trying to resolve. It's not about winning. It's about yielding the result. And if the communication strategy is strictly about winning, you've made it about yourself. So when we go back to that previous definition and it talks about effective communication has empathy and alignment and strategies that allow you to yield to the result, that says nothing about it's about you winning. It's about you. No. So that's one thing we have to depersonalize ourselves so we can say, are there other variables that could be influencing why this message isn't landing? And it could be that culture piece. But the main thing that I wanted to pull out from that clip, because I think it's relevant to the work that we're doing here, is Junior is the son, and he's sitting at the table with his dad and his granddad. The dad and the granddad had had a generational experience with the nod. That's not Junior's generation. That's not their experience. And when we think about the work that we're doing with students, none of us came out of high school or college with a hybrid experience. It's hard to do the nod when you're in a Zoom room. You see what I'm saying? So when I think about that, I think about my 19-year-old niece who's a sophomore at North Carolina Central University. There are things that I'm trying to impose on her that weren't part of her wasn't a part of her generational experience. Her generation communicates different. They value things a little bit differently. And in that moment, I have a choice to be Blockbuster or Costco, right? Am I going to evolve? Or am I going to expire and lose that space that I have with those young people because I refuse to move? I refuse to be open and welcome to other arts of communication that can strengthen how I do this work. If you're with me, So again, we talked a little bit about it not just being the verbal communication, but also the nonverbal. How we physically show up when folks communicate with us matters. It not is only about the receiver, but the deliverer. Many of us have heard the saying, it's not what you say, it's what? How you say it. Honey, don't talk crazy. That tone matters. It could be the exact same phrase, but the tone and inflections of your voice change. Here's an example. You good, question mark. So, and here we go. I'm gonna expose myself. This is what happens when I go off script. Hey, you good? That's like, I'm concerned about your well-being. I wanna check in. Hey, you good? If we just had a heated conversation, you good? Huh? You good? Or if you've had, I guess I could explain. You good? That means I'm not really caring about how you're feeling. I'm caring about winning. Because what's happening right here, look, I'm starting to sweat just thinking about it. I don't even have a situation in front of me, but it just evokes something. And then a dear friend shares an experience, something didn't go their way. You good. That's the same word, different tone and inflection. So tone definitely matters on how you communicate. So with that, I want to share a couple of strategies because nothing's worse than having a keynote come before you, say a whole bunch of stuff, and then you can't walk away with anything. And I'll make sure we circulate at least this image. In researching and preparing for this, they talk about the 7 C's of communication in the checklist. And the first one is you want to be clear, okay? Am I taking you on a journey or are we landing the plane? Avoid complex words and phrases. And let me tell you, being a young lady from the Midwest and my family is from North Little Rock, Arkansas, words and phrases is how we live, But all of those words and phrases may not translate across cultures. The whole, if you knew better, you do better. What does that mean, You gotta let a sleeping dog lie. What does that mean? That means something for us, but that may not translate across, nuck if you buck. No, I'm just kidding. You wanna avoid those complex words and phrases. You also wanna be concise, clear and to the point. Avoid the filler things because sometimes we're so wrapped up in, well, will they think I'm unintelligent if I don't present it a certain way? Or, so that goes back to the brand. If we're gonna be intentional about our brand, you also have to be confident about your brand. It is what it is, right? I am who I am. And whether I sound unintelligent to you or not is not important. What's important is, was I clear and concise and then concrete? Be specific, not vague. Use facts and figures to support your work. I tell folks all the time, working with people, it's an emotional thing. However, in communication, when you focus on your feelings, you fail. You have to focus on the facts and not necessarily about how you made it feel. Why? Because now you've centered yourself. And you can be deeply invested in the outcome. You want it to be successful. You want it to look good for folks. And you can do that without introducing them. You can articulate, here, I am laser focused on this particular component of the project because it's directly tied to our performance metrics for which we will be judged. That's why I'm passionate about seeing this. It's not about my feelings, right? It's the fact that it's directly tied to our success for this particular event. You want to be correct, try to avoid typos and all of that, and I'm sure they'll talk a little bit about that in some of the later sessions. Coherent, does your message make sense? How many, I'm just gonna raise my hand for myself, but ever receive that email and you're like, wait, what are you saying? This is not what we discussed. Right? And so you want to make sure that it's coherent. Does it make sense? Does it flow? And make sure that it's complete. And that requires for us to slow down. Slow down. I'd rather be efficient and accurate and timely versus timely and incorrect. So when we think about communication, it's important that we focus on being complete, and we also, I've talked a little bit about being courteous, but I'm gonna add 2 C's that aren't on there. We also have to be aware of the conditions and be conscious of the environment. And the reason I put the conditions on there is because we don't send emails when we're angry, hungry, or tired. And I know many of us know this, right? Halt when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Halt, stop. Honey, because when I am hungry, nobody wants to be with me, okay? But what I'll say about that is, if you're angry in the communication, we sometimes write it and we let it sit for 24 hours and we come back to it and we make it nice and pretty and then we send that, but we never get to the root cause of why was I angry? Why did this frustrate me? And when you think about clear communication builds collaboration. If I never tell you why I'm angry, I rob us of the opportunity from authenticating our working relationship. Now, some of us are like, I'm kind of conflict averse. Conflict is not a bad word. Conflict allows us to grow. Conflict, when invited in and managed appropriately across 2 people who care more about the outcome and being able to work together versus more than they care about winning, will take conflict and turn it into collaboration because you're talking through the pieces. And what more often than not, what you recognize is that it was broken communication that led to the conflict. There was a misunderstanding. Well, I interpreted this in this email as that, and that's not what I intended. But until you create those spaces to talk through those things, you find yourself never dealing with the root cause. Our workplaces become stronger and better when we work through difficult, intentionally and together, right? And so the conditions that we communicate are important. You could have just come out of a meeting where they have sent you to 10, you were deeply disappointed with the exchange, and now you got another meeting on your calendar. Y'all know how we schedule these meetings back to back to back. And now you're sitting, seething, and you're supposed to be talking about feeding the homeless people. Right? Or a service project. So what do? You've got to communicate. You know what? I am currently in a space where I'm not going to be able to give you 100%, and you don't deserve that. Do you mind if I take 15 minutes of our meeting and move it back a little bit? I'm committed to this, right? We've got to teach folks that it's okay to slow down because that helps your well-being. And that also models and introduces a new way to communicate and work. Why? Because it's time for something different. If we're going to survive these spaces, if we're going to survive the time that we are in, it is time for something different. So in addition to the conditions, we have to be conscious of those things that could be competing with our ability to show up in the fullness of the brand that we've committed to for ourselves, right? And so in addition to the 7 C's that are on your screen, you also want to be conscious of the environment and the conditions in which you are communicating. Good people of the SUNY Westchester Community College, as we think about how we can do more and give more, much of it begins with our communication. And what we say is a part of who we are. Every time I open my mouth, I'm conscious of how I show up in spaces. I'm conscious of the fact that I have an opportunity to make a deposit. And I want my deposits to add value versus not adding value to those spaces. Our goal is to ensure that these deposits are into the bucket of effective communication and not broken relationships. The deposits is into collaborative and empathetic collegial work together versus debits to that. And so when we think about the 7 C's, and if you add the other 2, we think about the nonverbal and the verbal, it is up to us. But one thing that is very clear, it's time for something different. So with that, I thank you for your time and attention. And I'll open it up for any questions. Ms. Nikki, I got time for questions. Y'all know I love fielding. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Questions. So let's talk about it. What questions do you have around communications, or it could be around anything? Questions. Open to questions or strategizing around how do you do it? when it's your supervisor, or how do you do it when you know it's the notorious colleague that has been around since Moses got the tablets on Mount Sinai? Questions. Yes, question in the back.
When you were speaking about communication, I was able to acknowledge that sometimes I have a tendency to be that person that interrupts. Because I'm trying to get my words out, and I guess as you said, I'm thinking it's about me. And so what I want to do is I want to change that. I acknowledge that that's something that I have a problem with, and I want to change that.
First of all, let me thank you for your brave and courageous contribution to the space, because that's half the battle, acknowledging that I do it. Because now that you've put it into space, your subconscious is going to challenge you and hold you accountable, right? So first of all, let's acknowledge that, because there are folks that need to and won't. So with that, when we talk about active listening, oftentimes when we fail to actively listen to understand versus listening to respond, it could be a couple of variables that are challenging us, right? Sometimes we want to get to the finish line. We want to provide the answer. We want to resolve the issue. We want to get to the finish line. Or maybe we know we have this other meeting that I need to finish my notes from, so I'm trying to move this along. So we have to sit with what provokes me to jump in. Is it because I believe I have the answer? If so, let me jot it down and listen while they're speaking. I have a notepad all the time when I'm meeting with folks, or my iPad, so that I can take notes on what's being said, so that I can be intentional about my response. Because the other thing is, we have to be mindful of the deliverer of the message. Them being able to tell the full story might just be the validation that they need to get it out, that they have, because if you think about it, they thought it not robbery for you to be their listening ear, for you to be the thought partner for this conversation. So with that, we want to pay homage, I guess, or show respect to the fact that they chose us to be the receiver and the thought partner in this situation. So thank you for sharing, and hopefully that strategy will help. Like I said, I take notes sometimes when folks are sharing things, but then let me decenter me. And it's okay to acknowledge it when it happens. Let me be clear, I do it as well. And I say, you know what? I jumped in, I didn't let you finish your sentence. My apologies. Go right ahead. And then I jot down what my thought is so that I don't forget it. So thank you for sharing. Yes. Hey, friend.
Best advice for speaking with a supervisor, if you're bringing up, say, a topic that concerns you and your colleagues, and maybe it could create maybe a little tension, just really best strategies for communicating with a supervisor.
Thank you. So strategies for communicating with a supervisor, particularly when the situation is heavy. Now, for the safest response, it depends, and this is why I say that. It depends on the type of supervisor you have. If there is a supervisor where you have to kind of manage up, right, that I'll leave it there, where you have to manage up, more often than not, that person, if you're going to present to them an issue, we also have to present a solution, and a solution that makes it seem like they came up with the idea. Am I lying? So, depending on the supervisor that you have, it also works in marriage too, huh? Depending on the supervisor, if it's a heavy issue, right? And so I'm gonna give you supervisor number 2. Maybe it's less about them, but they are really clear that they need our unit to be successful. And they may be data driven. They always talk about the strategic priorities and the strategic plan and blah, blah, blah. And there's an issue that they need to address. With this particular supervisor, I'm going to tie the suggestion that if we get this right, it's directly connected to this strategic priority, and then the next time you go in front of this meeting, you can say, blah, 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 blah. So it really depends on the type of supervisor that you have. Now, if it's a deeply a deep space of conflict, that might be the supervisor calling, a deep space of conflict, am I going to say this? Sometimes I have to introduce the full reality to folks, that our failure to respond to this could lead to litigation, right? And so we don't, and that's a direct contradiction to our brand as a unit, right? And so some of these pieces, you have to tie it to the overall brand. You have to, you know, if it's about stroking the ego, you got to place it that way. And then it's like, if we don't do this, we're going to be in trouble. Nobody wants to be in trouble. And I'm not saying that you need to create a culture of fear, but that's a reality. And so for me, it's doing either of those based on the type of supervisor models how to handle hard well. Because sometimes folks are in supervisory positions and they don't know how to handle that hard piece. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? Well, here are a couple of options. Here's some some solutions to the challenge. And if you don't have the answer, connect them to the people that do. And that's all from communication. But if we don't say anything, or if we just like, it'll work itself out, then we become, you know, an accomplice to that space.
To piggyback off of this question, I'm gonna switch it around. So you the supervisor and you're sharing information with the people that's under you, but some people think it's an attack on them. How do we change that?
So a part of it is when folks think it's an attack on them, let me be clear, sometimes there are some passive aggressive supervisors that throw shade and memos and you know that they're speaking to you about it. But if you get wind that an employee is feeling as though your attempts are a direct attack on their work, you got to create that space to talk through it. And it can't be from a I heard or, you know, hey, I want to walk you through this memo to make sure that we're clear on what this is, right? If the employee feels like it's that personal attack, as a supervisor, I'm pretty sure more often than not, the supervisor is aware of why that person feels it's a personal attack. And often when that climate is created, the supervisor has to own whether or not I missed an opportunity to provide constructive feedback in a timely manner, in a direct manner, and over a period of time. So effective communication requires for us to be accountable. When I talk about being decentralizing, one of the things that I have to recognize as a leader is that there may be moments where I'm the villain in somebody's story. And if that's brought to me, I have to sit with that, and then I have to course correct that behavior. Now that requires a level of emotional intelligence. What they say, experience is a good teacher. Life is a good teacher. And situations will humble you. And as leaders who oversee the work and development and lived experience of folks on a day-to-day basis, we have a responsibility to call those things in. The best way to fail is to establish an unarticulated expectation. Because by the time the memo comes out, but you failed to have the conversation with people over time, you've now created a situation that you've got to spend mental space, emotional space, and time correcting. Because we didn't start the clear, concise, consistent, and controlled communication before. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Another question that, come on, everybody warm now. We're gonna go to the back, down here, and then to my left, I saw him. Yes?
So you were talking about the 7 C's of communication. An example of when you jump around between a bunch of different tasks and then you're in that meeting, the homeless meeting, and you can't just concentrate. I find myself in that situation a lot because my job has to jump between a bunch of different tasks in a day. So how would you strategize that situation? So like I'm not in a meeting that I want to give my all in, but I'm just focused on the fact that I wasn't able to complete something that happened earlier in the day.
Very good question. Thank you for sharing. Number one, it's always a story, Tiffany, land the plane. One of the things that I learned in Financial Peace University when I was learning about how to better handle my finances, it talked about treat your time like your money. You should name it before you get it. That way you can tell it where it should go. I was like, that is an amazing concept because I never named my money. Honey, it went wherever the wind blew that day. But to think about imparting that on your time. So weekly, I have blocks where people cannot schedule anything on my calendar. So that in the event that I have those busy days, I've created a light at the end of the tunnel where I know between 12 and 12:50, I can just breathe. Or I can go to my car and record Instagram videos to talk about work. No, I'm just kidding. So that time, the management of the calendar really helps with those competing priorities. In order for me to effectively communicate, I cannot be in things back to back to back to back to back, because then nobody gets anything. So go ahead next week, block off 50-minute blocks throughout the week so you have that light at the end of the tunnel. For me, I always have to have something that I'm looking forward to where I know I'll be able to pull my shoulders out my ears and exhale, right? So that is very helpful for me. And then also, if there is a meeting with a trusted colleague, or it may even be with a group, I'll let them know, I need about 10 minutes. I've been in back-to-backs, and I'll be right in. It's not that I don't value what we're going to talk about, but for me to give you my best, I need these 10 minutes. Is that all right? And I do that sometimes at 9 in the morning for a 2 o'clock meeting, because I recognize some folks done slid in on my calendar that weren't there, the night before, right? So, and that is okay. And that's communication. I'm teaching folks that I desire to give you my best anytime that time is on the calendar. And yet there are some things that are challenging my ability to do that. Very good question. Yes, ma'am. In the pink, yes.
How do you politely get them to land the plane?
How do you politely get them to land the plane? You've got to create, depending on your communication style, this is what would work for me. You know what? I love a good vacation and a trip, but I have a 3 o'clock that I got to prepare for, so I can either give you 10 minutes now, or I can give you 50 minutes at the end of the day. You tell me, right? Now, if they pop in and it's just out of the blue, because you know how we love because after COVID, everybody walking by the office. If the door is open, I'm coming in and we talking. But we have to say, hey, as much as I'd love to catch up, not as much as I'd love. You know what? I'd love to go into this further. Let's schedule a coffee so I can get all of it, right? Sometimes I don't have to tell you what I have on my plate, because they have things on the plate too. But it's like, you know what? I want to be able to hear a little bit more about that. Let's put a coffee or a lunch on the calendar. And so that's my polite way of saying. And sometimes the most polite way is directly. Oh, you know what? I thought this was just a quick little update. Now I know the date that your grandbaby got to get immunizations and the reaction that they had. Oh, I thought it was a quick update. Let me be clear. I got to get to this real quick. I'm going to circle back, and I'll try to grab some time on your calendar so I can learn more. I think the most polite way is the direct way. And there was a question to my left. Yes?
What would you recommend to somebody who struggles with setting addressing boundaries and voicing those boundaries?
Very good question. And I'm going to take you to a place that has nothing to do with communication. Because that is a very real question. And the depth of that question may require a little bit more work of asking myself, why don't I have healthy boundaries? Why do I always make myself available? It's not that I'm a bad communicator. And maybe that's something that stems from, I'll go there, childhood. Because I've wanted to be a people pleaser. That's been my whole story. So I don't have those healthy boundaries. See, when I talk about communication and how we show up, I'm talking about doing the deep inner work. I'm not just talking about who your W-9 says you are here for WCC. When I say it's time for something different, I'm talking about looking interpersonally at challenging myself. For me to do this, what's required? And it may be that deep inner work of answering the question, wow, I'm a boundaryless person because I've always wanted to please folks because I've never fit in, or because I'm never typically heard, or I'm never seen the way I want to be seen. So that's why I make myself available. And I think once you start answering those questions and exploring that, then you could say, you know what? I'm going to start building boundaries by blocking off my calendar from 9 to 9:30 and from 4:30 to 5. Because you're the person that gets here at 7 and stays till 7:15, 8 p.m., right? You do. And so those are ways that you can start building in those boundaries for your professional life. And guess what? It'll spill over into your personal life. Much as I love my family in the Midwest, I can't answer every FaceTime because you want to show me the peppers that you're growing in your garden, right? So those boundaries are important. But before, they were used to that because I was always available and always accessible. But in order for me to show up in the brand that I want to evolve and not expire, it requires me to do that inner work and then start putting those pieces in place. And it's little baby steps over time, boundaries over time. Hopefully that was helpful. Down front, and now come to the back.
How do you bolster change in the Blockbusters and Kodaks in your area?
So how do you bolster change in the Blockbusters and Kodaks in your area? So I'm gonna start here and say, oh, man, this is my gosh. Okay. Sometimes we have to realize that it's time to let the Blockbusters and the Kodaks go. And we have to create a safe space for folks to be able to transition appropriately. Some things are meant to expire. Now, if you read about Blockbuster and Kodak, and I'll even offer BlackBerry, those businesses, hello, y'all remember the BlackBerry? I used to love my little BlackBerry code. Those businesses failed to pay attention to industry indicators early. The market was forecasting, watch this, the market was forecasting where they were headed, but they thought so highly of themselves. They thought they would be everlasting. And it's some people in the workplace, that think so highly of what they bring. You can't move me. Oh, but the evolution happened around them. And eventually they became obsolete. So those are two things. Sometimes we have to be okay with letting things expire. And then we also have to be okay with evolving around things in the event we can't release them to the talent pool, right? But you can create your workplace expectations, your strategies, how you run your meetings reflective of the community and culture and communication that you desire. So here's what we know. Two things, light and darkness can't occupy the same space. Think about it. You go into a dark room, minute you hit the switch, darkness is gone. So for me, a part of my brand is to be light in every room that I go into, and darkness gets uncomfortable. It starts sweating, it's like, ooh. So that's what I will offer there. I'm gonna stop there before y'all be like, she done told me to quit my job. I quit, and then now I can't come back to WCC because everybody done left. Virginia, I think I saw your hand. Oh, my last question. Thank you. See, y'all got to keep y'all on schedule. Yes. I saw your name in the highway.
Very often the brain is going like 200,000 miles an hour, and like you're just going, like to the point where you feel like overwhelmed and you're ready to just crash. Is there an exercise or something you do when you find yourself getting ahead in that way and wasting some things to remind yourself you need to slow down?
Absolutely. 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 I'm going to give you two strategies. I'm going to give you the pause. Here's the thing, scientific piece. We know that our brains are processing 11.4 billion bits of information every second in the subconscious. And in the conscious mind, only 94 bits, right? If you don't believe me, how many times did you breathe today? Right? Your body subconsciously is doing that. So naturally, all of those things are being processed. And then in the conscious mind, you feel like you're processing all of this. One of the things, the power of the pause. If you are not practicing some sort of breathing or pausing throughout the day, getting up from the desk and sitting in stillness and silence, that is one thing. Creating those moments, the power of the pause. The second thing, I listen to brown noise when I sleep because I'm constantly processing. Many of us have Alexa or some other device in our homes, or maybe even your mobile device. Find you a brown noise station and turn that on. I have the Peloton app and I do a sleep meditation. I log on for the 20-minute sleep meditation, 37 seconds in, I'm knocked out. I never make it to the full 20 minutes because that is the way I slow my brain down to get rest. Rest is an act of resistance to the everyday demands of life. And I'm a resistor. Right? So you have to use those moments to create those opportunities to rest. So practicing some sort of coming back to center and breathing, the affirmations, I'm an answer and not for everything, right? So when the things get super, super heavy, I'm an answer and I'm not for everything. And I connect with that breath to bring me back to center. And then I challenge my brain to fully rest by listening to some brown noise or some pink noise or whatever. But you turn that thing on, and now don't turn it on at work, because... But anyway, thank you. Yes.
One of our committee members has a question, and then we'll end it with that.
Oh, absolutely, because y'all invited me here. You absolutely get the last question.
So, when communicating with a colleague who gets angry, how do you handle that?
You know what? I recognize that there's a level of emotion in this room that's not going to allow this message to land. So I want to take a break and allow ourselves to process, because I don't want the message to get lost in the mess. Now, I might not say that last part, because then I say mess and then they up again. But we have to encourage folks, because some folks may not know that they're presenting angrily. You know what? I recognize that there's a climate developing amidst this conversation that might prevent both of us from receiving what we want to share. Let's take a break and come back to it. And what often happens is before we come back to it, if that employee has a level of awareness, if that colleague has a level of awareness, they'll say, you know what, I recognize that I was leaning into some frustration and anger, and here's why. And if they don't, then I'm gonna invite that. I recognize that we were leaning into an emotion, and I think it's important for us to address why, so we don't have to get there again. What I can commit to, we'll get there together, but I don't want to get there again. And that's something I practice in my everyday life. My daughter's 28 years old, and that's a strategy I had to learn to ensure that our relationship, because I want you to know that your feelings are real. And your feelings by your lived experience are valid for you. And so we're going to create a space and talk about that. I'm not going to spend all day with it, but we're going to talk about it, and we're going to get through this together. But that has to be the commitment, but that's a part of my brand and how I show up. Some may say, you get mad, I'm cutting, I'm done. But then you rob that person the opportunity of becoming better from managing their emotion, because you haven't showed them the mirror of themselves. Right? So thank you for that question, and thank you for your time. I know I went over. I appreciate it.